My name is Elena Hart. I'm 32, and I used to think the end of a marriage would look like a slammed door, a cheating confession, or a screaming fight that left the neighbors peeking through blinds. But mine ended in the living room on a Wednesday night with a half-eaten box of takeout on my coffee table, food I paid for, while my boyfriend's best friend sat on my couch like he lived there. His name was Noah. Noah had that kind of grin that never reached his eyes, the grin that said, "I'm watching something fall apart, and I'm enjoying it." I remember the exact moment I stepped through the door because the smell hit me first. Fried oil, cold sauce, and that stale sweetness of soda left open too long. Then I heard Bailey, our dog, our goofy golden retriever who had been our practice kid before we ever talked about real kids, whined softly from the kitchen. The sound wasn't dramatic. It was worse than dramatic. It was patient. It was the sound of a creature waiting for someone who kept forgetting him. I dropped my keys into the bowl by the door and looked down the hallway. The apartment looked lived in, not in a warm way, in a way that felt like the place had been taken hostage. Clothes were scattered across the floor like somebody had emptied a hamper and walked away mid-thought. The kitchen light was on, highlighting a sink crowded with dishes like an unwashed monument. There were 2 full trash bags by the door that hadn't been taken out. And on the couch, legs stretched out, feet on my coffee table, Noah scrolled through his phone like he was waiting for the next episode of a show. Beside him sat my boyfriend, Victor, laughing at something Noah showed him. Victor didn't even look up when I walked in, not at first, just a lazy chuckle, like my presence was background noise. I stood there for a second longer than I should have, letting the scene settle into my body the way cold air settles into bone. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice neutral. Victor finally glanced up. "Oh, you're home. Oh, you're home. 7 years together. 7. Reduced to the tone you use when the delivery arrives." My eyes drifted to the takeout containers. 2 boxes, both almost empty. No third box. Meaning they'd eaten, and either forgot I existed or didn't care. I stepped into the kitchen and crouched beside Bailey's bowl. Empty. His water dish was low, too. The bottom ringed with that slimy line that happens when nobody bothers to rinse it out. Bailey pressed his head against my shoulder like an apology he didn't owe me. I scratched behind his ears, and I felt something inside my chest tighten. Not anger yet, not even sadness. Recognition. I filled his water. I poured kibble into his bowl. The sound echoed in the too quiet kitchen like it was the only real responsibility anyone in this apartment remembered. When I stood, I didn't march into the living room. I didn't throw a tantrum. I didn't pick a fight. I just walked in calmly and said, "Did you guys feed Bailey today?" Noah let out a small laugh, like I'd just asked Victor if he'd polished my crown. Victor sighed in that theatrical way that always made me feel like I was asking for too much oxygen. "I was going to," he said, dragging the words out. "But you're home now, so—" Noah leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Wow," he said, voice dripping with fake amazement. "You talk to him like he's your employee." I looked at Noah for a beat, and I swear it wasn't even hatred I felt. It was clarity, because Noah wasn't the disease. He was the infection that revealed the wound. "I'm not talking to him like anything," I said evenly. "I'm asking if our dog was fed." Victor shifted, annoyed now. "Babe, relax." "Relax?" I repeated softly. I gestured around the room without theatrics. This place is a mess. Bailey's bowl is empty. Trash is overflowing. I worked all day. I have an early call tomorrow. I'm not trying to start a fight. I'm asking if you did anything today. Noah's grin widened, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. "She's acting like you owe her chores, man." Victor nodded along. Nodded. Like Noah was translating me into a language Victor suddenly preferred. And then Victor said it. He looked me dead in the eye, like he was proud of what he was about to claim. And he said, "I don't have to cook, clean, or even sleep with you, Elena. Those aren't requirements. Stop acting entitled to my time." The room went quiet in a way that felt heavy. Noah's smile didn't fade. If anything, it sharpened, like a judge delivering a verdict he enjoyed. And I stood there, staring at Victor, feeling the strangest thing happen inside me. Not heartbreak. Not rage. Something cleaner. Something final. Because I realized he wasn't speaking from frustration. He was speaking from belief. This wasn't a man having a bad day. This was a man confessing what he thought marriage meant, or what he thought I was supposed to accept. I nodded once, slowly, like I'd just heard a weather report. "Okay," I said. Victor blinked, as if my calm response didn't fit the script he was hoping for. Noah snorted. "There you go," he muttered, smug. "Boundaries." I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I didn't try to explain partnership to a man who'd already decided he was exempt from it. Instead, I walked past them into the bedroom, changed into sweatpants, and came back out with Bailey's leash in my hand. Victor frowned. "Where are you going?" I clipped Bailey's leash and looked at Victor like he'd asked something confusing. "I'm taking Bailey out." Noah leaned back, satisfied, like he'd won something. Victor rolled his eyes. "Whatever." I paused at the door and turned back just enough to meet Victor's gaze. "You're right about one thing," I said quietly. "I need to stop acting entitled." Victor smirked, misunderstanding me completely. I opened the door, Bailey trotting beside me, tail wagging like he still believed in people. And as the hallway air hit my face, I made a decision so calm it almost scared me. If Victor truly believed he had no obligations to me as a partner, then starting tomorrow, I would live by the same rule. No announcements, no speeches, no drama, just consequences. Before Victor became the man who could look me in the eye and tell me he didn't owe me effort, responsibility, or intimacy, he was someone else. Or maybe he was always this person, and I just met him before he felt safe enough to stop pretending. We met in 2016, at a mutual friend's backyard barbecue, the kind of lazy summer afternoon where the music is too loud, the drinks are warm, and everyone feels a little more optimistic than they should. Victor stood out immediately, not because he was flashy, but because he listened. He asked questions and actually waited for the answers. He laughed easily. He remembered details. I remember thinking, this is someone who shows up. For a long time, he did. Those early years felt simple in the best way. We moved in together after a year, arguing playfully over couch colors and whether plants were a commitment or a decoration. We adopted Bailey on a whim after walking past a rescue event and just wanting to look. Bailey was ridiculous, too big for his paws, endlessly affectionate, utterly convinced he was a lapdog. He became our anchor. We talked about the future in vague, hopeful terms. No rigid timelines, no pressure, just the assumption that we were building something together. And for a while, we were. I liked cooking. I genuinely did. It relaxed me after long days, gave me something tangible to focus on. Victor said he admired that about me, said it made our apartment feel like a home. He'd handle social plans, birthdays, keeping up with friends, or at least that's what we agreed. At the time, it felt balanced. If I cooked, he'd order groceries. If I handled laundry, he'd take care of the weekend. If I noticed the dog needed more exercise, he'd nod and say, "Yeah, I've got it." Looking back now, I realize how often "I've got it" meant you'll handle it eventually. But when you're in love, you don't audit effort. You assume it evens out. Somewhere around year 5, things shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once. Victor stopped asking how my day went. And if he did ask, his eyes would already be drifting toward his phone. Conversations shortened. Plans became vague. Weekends turned into, "let's see," which turned into nothing. At first, I told myself it was normal. Long-term relationships have seasons. Work stress happens. People get tired. But this wasn't exhaustion. It was disengagement. That was also around the time Noah entered our lives more permanently. Noah had just gone through a rough divorce. He was charismatic, wounded in a way that made people lean in, full of opinions he delivered like wisdom earned through suffering. Victor listened to him like a disciple. Noah talked a lot about freedom, about how men give too much in relationships, about how expectations are traps. Victor started repeating phrases I didn't recognize as his own. Emotional labor, unrealistic standards, women always want more. I tried not to overreact. I tried to stay curious instead of defensive. But something else started bothering me, something smaller, but sharper. Every time Noah brought up Victor's ex, Trish, Victor reacted. Not overtly, not obviously. Just a half-second delay, a tightened jaw, a change in tone. They'd been broken up long before I entered the picture. I never felt threatened by Trish. But Victor never liked when her name came up. Never joked about that chapter, the way people do when it's truly closed. I noticed it. I filed it away. Meanwhile, at home, the balance tipped quietly. Groceries stopped appearing unless I bought them. Bailey's walks became later. Dishes lingered longer. Trash waited by the door. When I asked about it, Victor would say, "I was going to," or "I didn't notice," or "You're better at that stuff." Better, not responsible. Better. The emotional distance grew alongside the physical one. Touch became rare. Intimacy felt scheduled, mechanical, like something he tolerated rather than wanted. I tried to talk about it, gently, carefully. "Are you okay? Is something bothering you? Did I do something?" Victor always had an answer that went nowhere. "I'm just tired. Work's been a lot." I need space. And every time I accepted that, I pushed my own needs further down the list. By the time Noah was over 3 or 4 nights a week, by the time Victor spent more time venting to him than talking to me, by the time I realized I was alone in a relationship that technically had 2 people in it, the truth had already settled in. I just hadn't named it yet. But that Wednesday night? That sentence? That was the name. And once you name something, you can't unsee it. Once you start paying attention, neglect is impossible to unsee. It isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up in the empty spaces. What stops happening? What stops being asked? What stops being cared about? Victor stopped asking about my day entirely. Not even the automatic, polite version. I'd come home, keys in hand, and he wouldn't look up from his phone. I'd mention something stressful or exciting, and his responses became placeholders. That's crazy. Yeah? He was physically present but mentally elsewhere, like a man waiting for something better to load. The apartment reflected it. Dishes stacked, dust settled, laundry waited. Not because Victor didn't see it, but because he didn't feel responsible for it. Bailey felt it too. His walks became inconsistent. His food bowl was often empty when I got home. I'd ask Victor if he'd taken him out, and he'd say, "I thought you did," even when he knew I'd been gone all day. When I brought it up, carefully, Victor sighed like I was criticizing his character instead of addressing a shared responsibility. "You're always on my case lately," he said once, irritation flashing across his face. "Can you just relax?" Relax. As if neglect were a personality quirk. And Noah was always there, just close enough to hear, just involved enough to comment. Noah framed everything as a power struggle. She wants control. Women always escalate. Once you give in, they expect more. Victor soaked it up. I tried to counterbalance with reality. "I'm not asking for perfection," I said one night, sitting across from Victor at the table we barely used anymore. "I'm asking to not feel alone in my own home." Victor didn't look at me. He stared at the wall behind my head, jaw clenched. "I can't breathe when you talk like that," he said. And suddenly my feelings were the problem. I noticed how Victor lit up around Noah in ways he never did with me anymore. He laughed. He engaged. He complained. He felt heard. With me, he withdrew. The resentment started leaking out in small, sharp ways. Eye rolls, dismissive tones, passive comments about how I was too intense or reading into things. And every time I tried to address the growing distance, Victor accused me of nagging. The irony was suffocating, because I was doing everything possible not to nag. The night that really broke something in me was a Thursday, weeks before the blow-up. I'd had a brutal day at work, the kind where everything piles up and nothing goes right. All I wanted was to come home, eat something warm, and sit in silence with someone who felt like mine. I walked in to find the apartment trashed. Again. Noah was there. Again. Bailey was pacing. Again. Victor was laughing at his phone. Again. I stood there for a moment, watching the scene like an outsider. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I felt invisible. I asked Victor quietly if we could talk later, just the 2 of us. Noah snorted. "Here we go." Victor didn't shut him down. Victor smiled at him. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just neglect. It was alignment. Victor had chosen his side, and it wasn't with me. I went to bed that night without another word. Victor didn't follow, didn't check in, didn't notice. I lay awake listening to Bailey's soft breathing at my feet and wondered how long I'd been trying to save something the other person had already abandoned. The answer, I realized, was longer than I wanted to admit. By the time that Wednesday night arrived, the takeout, the sentence, the smirk, I wasn't shocked. I was confirmed. And that confirmation made my next move inevitable. Because once neglect becomes a pattern instead of an accident, love turns into labor. And labor without reciprocity becomes exploitation. The morning after Victor told me he didn't owe me anything, I woke up before my alarm. Not because I was anxious, because I was calm. That was the first sign something fundamental had shifted inside me. Normally, my mornings followed an invisible script I'd perfected over years. Feed Bailey, refill his water, start the coffee, tidy the living room just enough to make it feel manageable, check the fridge and mentally plan dinner, carry the weight of the day before it even started. That morning, I didn't do any of it. I got out of bed, showered, dressed, and clipped Bailey's leash. I still took him out. Not for Victor, for Bailey. Because boundaries don't mean neglecting the innocent. When we came back in, Victor was awake, scrolling through his phone in bed. He watched me pass the kitchen without stopping. Didn't say anything. Didn't notice. I grabbed my bag and headed for the door. "Hey," Victor said finally. "Aren't you making coffee?" I paused, hand on the doorknob, and turned around. "No," I said simply. You're right, I don't have to. The confusion on his face was almost comical. I left before he could respond. The first day passed quietly, too quietly. When I got home that evening, the apartment was already showing signs of decay. No coffee cups washed, no trash taken out. Bailey's bowl half filled, sloppily. Victor was annoyed, but not alarmed. That came later. By day 3, things were unraveling fast. Bailey started whining more, not constantly, but enough to be noticeable. His schedule was off, his walks inconsistent. I stepped in when it affected him, but I refused to cushion Victor from the consequences of his neglect. The dishes piled up. The trash smelled. Laundry overflowed. Victor kept expecting me to crack. Instead, I ate my own meals, meal prepped on Sunday, labeled containers, my name written clearly on top. I kept my food separate in the fridge. I washed only my dishes. The first time Victor noticed, he stared at the fridge like it had betrayed him. "Why is your name on everything?" he asked. "So we don't get confused," I said calmly. He scoffed. "This is childish." I looked at him. "I'm just respecting your boundaries." That phrase started haunting him. By the end of the first week, Victor was irritated constantly, short-tempered, snapping over nothing. He texted me during work one afternoon. "Can you pick up groceries on your way home?" I replied, "I'll get food for myself." There was a long pause. Then, "Are you serious right now?" "Yes." When I got home, he was pacing the kitchen, phone in hand, clearly rehearsing an argument. "You're acting like we're roommates," he said. I shrugged. "That's how you describe the expectations." The sink clogged midweek. Normally, I would have fixed it without thinking. 10 minutes. A drain snake. Done. Instead, I watched the water back up, listened to Victor curse under his breath, and said nothing. He called the landlord. The landlord told him it wasn't covered. Victor slammed his phone down. "This is ridiculous." I met his eyes. "You'll need a plumber." He stared at me. "You know how to do this stuff." I nodded. "I do." "Then why aren't you helping?" "Because helping someone who refuses partnership only teaches them they can keep taking." "I don't have to," I said. That's when something changed in his expression. Not anger. Fear. The apartment started to smell. Not dramatically, just enough to feel wrong. Victor started ordering takeout constantly, leaving containers everywhere, eating in front of me like I'd cave and clean up after him. I didn't. And then, 2 weeks in, Victor tried a different tactic. He came into the bedroom one night wearing cologne he hadn't used in years. He'd changed the sheets, dimmed the lights, lingered too close. I looked at him and felt nothing. He touched my arm. "We've been distant," he said softly. "We should reconnect." I thought of his words from that Wednesday. I moved his hand away gently. "You said you don't have to sleep with me," I reminded him. "That works both ways." The hurt on his face was immediate, real, like it had never occurred to him that autonomy could be mutual. "I'm not interested in transactional affection," I said. "If you want intimacy, show up as a partner first." I rolled over and went to sleep. He didn't try again. But I knew then, deep in my bones, that something irreversible had begun. Because the moment a man realizes he's lost control over access, comfort, and convenience, he shows you who he really is. The rejection rattled Victor in a way nothing else had. I could see it in how he moved through the apartment afterward, louder, sharper, like he needed to remind himself he still took up space. He slammed cabinet doors. He left lights on in rooms he wasn't using. He sighed heavily, the kind of sigh meant to be noticed. He didn't bring up the bedroom directly, not at first. Instead, Noah did. I overheard them one evening while I was in the bedroom folding my own laundry. Only my laundry. The door wasn't fully closed, and Victor hadn't bothered to lower his voice. "She's playing games," Noah said. "Classic power move. Don't give in." "I'm not," Victor replied, but there was hesitation there now, uncertainty. "Women do this when they feel like they're losing leverage," Noah continued confidently. "You can't reward that. She'll come around." I stopped folding, not because I was angry, because something clicked into place. Victor didn't see intimacy as connection anymore. He saw it as currency. That realization landed heavier than any insult. Later that night, Victor tried a softer approach. He sat beside me on the couch, close enough that I could feel his leg against mine, his body angled just slightly toward me like an offering. "You've been different," he said. I kept my eyes on the TV. "So have you." He laughed lightly, like we were flirting. "Come on, you know what I mean." I turned to look at him then, really look at him. This was a man who used to reach for my hand automatically, who used to notice when I was tired before I said anything, who used to ask what I needed instead of assuming. Now he was studying me like a problem he needed to solve. "I do know what you mean," I said, "and that's the problem." His jaw tightened. "You're punishing me." I'm respecting your words. That's not the same thing. It is when they reveal how you see me. He opened his mouth, closed it again. Noah's voice echoed faintly from the kitchen, laughing at something on his phone. Victor leaned back, exasperated. You're blowing this out of proportion. I smiled faintly, not because it was funny, because it was predictable. That night, I heard Victor on the phone in the bathroom. The door was closed, but not fully latched. His voice carried just enough. Oh no, she doesn't know, he said quietly. A pause. I'm handling it. Then the name. Trish. My body went cold. He didn't say much more, just murmurs. Reassurances. Something about timing. When he came out, he avoided my eyes. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Because I wasn't ready to accuse. I was ready to observe. The next few days confirmed what my intuition had already flagged. Victor guarded his phone like it contained state secrets. He angled it away from me, took calls in the other room, smiled at messages he never explained. At the same time, his behavior toward me oscillated wildly. One moment, he was distant and dismissive, echoing Noah's rhetoric about independence and boundaries. The next, he was suddenly attentive, bringing me coffee without being asked, complimenting my appearance, asking questions that felt rehearsed. It was whiplash, and it wasn't about love. It was about control. One evening, after another awkward attempt at closeness, Victor snapped. So what, you're just done with intimacy now? He asked, frustration bleeding through. You don't want me? I met his gaze steadily. That's not what this is. Then what is it? This is me realizing that intimacy without respect feels empty. He scoffed. You're making it complicated. No, I said softly. You did that when you turned partnership into entitlement. He stared at me like he didn't recognize the woman in front of him. And maybe he didn't, because the woman who used to explain, to negotiate, to soften her words so he wouldn't feel attacked, she was gone. In her place stood someone who had finally understood the rules of the game and decided to stop playing. Behind Victor's frustration, behind Noah's poisonous advice, behind the sudden appearance of Trish's name, there was panic. And panic, I was learning, makes people reckless. If intimacy shook Victor's ego, money shattered the illusion completely. For years, I'd quietly absorbed the financial imbalance without calling it what it was. Not because we'd agreed on some uneven split, but because every time Victor came up short, I stepped in. Rent, utilities, groceries, vet bills, subscriptions he forgot to cancel. I told myself it was temporary. That partnership meant flexibility. What I hadn't realized was that flexibility had turned into expectation. The week after I refused him in bed, I opened a new checking account on my lunch break. No drama, no anger, just math. I pulled bank statements going back 2 years, highlighted shared expenses, calculated what half actually was, not what Victor assumed it was. The number surprised even me. I'd been covering close to 70% of our household costs. That night, I sat at the table with my laptop open and the figures laid out neatly. Victor glanced at the screen, then at me. What's this? Our expenses, I said calmly. Split evenly. This is what your share actually comes out to. He laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. That can't be right. It is. I slid the breakdown toward him. Rent, utilities, internet, dog expenses, streaming services, his phone bill on my plan, his car insurance on my policy. His face drained of color as he scanned the numbers. I didn't know it was that much, he said quietly. I know, I replied, because you never had to. I told him I'd canceled his access to my credit cards, that I'd removed him from my streaming accounts, that starting next month, he'd be responsible for his share, no more quiet subsidies. Victor's shock turned into anger almost instantly. This is financial abuse, he snapped. You're trying to control me. I didn't raise my voice. Expecting an adult with a job to pay their fair share isn't abuse. Expecting your partner to bankroll your life while you contribute nothing is. He opened his mouth, closed it. Noah's voice floated in from the kitchen, like clockwork. She's gaslighting you, man. This is textbook. I turned toward Noah. Are you offering to help cover his bills? Silence. Victor shot Noah a look, irritation flashing across his face for the first time. Noah shrugged. I'm just saying. I know what you're saying, I interrupted. You're saying responsibility feels like oppression when you're used to being carried. Noah scoffed, grabbed his jacket, and left with a muttered comment about toxic dynamics. The door slammed. Victor stood there, jaw clenched, fists tight. You're blowing this up. No, I said. I'm finally looking at it. The next few weeks were ugly. Victor had to cancel subscription boxes he'd never even opened, cut back on nights out, actually look at his bank account. He complained constantly about prices, about stress, about how unfair it all felt. Noah, kept texting him encouragement, telling him to leave me, to assert himself, to reclaim his power. But Noah wasn't paying Victor's bills. That reality sank in fast. Victor tried guilt next. I thought we were a team. We are, I said. Teams share the load. He tried anger. You're doing this to punish me. No, I said. I'm doing this to stop punishing myself. And then, predictably, he tried charm. Sudden compliments. Offers to cook that ended in burnt pans and takeout. Half-hearted cleaning that skipped the hard parts. Suggestions of date nights that felt like bribes. None of it addressed the truth. Victor didn't want partnership. He wanted comfort without contribution. And when he realized that wasn't coming back, something in him hardened. I noticed it in the way he texted more, guarded his phone more, took longer calls in private. And one night, when he fell asleep with his phone buzzing on the nightstand, I saw the name light up the screen again. Trish. This time with a heart emoji. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't need to, because the final line had already been crossed. And now it was just a matter of how cleanly I wanted to leave. The moment Victor realized money, intimacy, and convenience were no longer guaranteed, he changed. Not internally. Strategically. It started with an apology that sounded right but felt hollow. I've been thinking, he said one morning, leaning against the counter like this was a casual reset. I haven't been showing up the way I should. I waited. Real apologies don't rush to the finish line. He continued, I guess I didn't realize how much pressure you were under. There it was. Didn't realize. Not I hurt you, not I took advantage. Just ignorance. Convenient, blameless ignorance. That same night, he cooked dinner. Or tried to. The smoke alarm went off. The chicken was dry. The kitchen looked worse afterward than before he started. He watched me carefully as I ate my portion, like he was waiting for applause. See, he said, I'm trying. I know, I replied. And I meant it. But effort without accountability is just performance. Over the next week, Victor became almost helpful. Too helpful. He vacuumed half the living room, wiped the counter but not the sink, took Bailey out once, then announced it like a heroic act. He suggested date nights, movie nights, reconnecting. Every offer carried the same unspoken expectation. Now things can go back to normal. But I wasn't confused anymore. Normal was the problem. One night, as we sat on opposite ends of the couch watching something neither of us cared about, Victor reached for my hand. I didn't pull away. I just didn't squeeze back. You're still mad, he said quietly. I'm not mad, I answered. I'm aware. He frowned. That's worse. He was right, because awareness doesn't negotiate. A few days later, I noticed a charge on our shared statement I hadn't seen before. Not large, not dramatic. A restaurant across town. One I'd never been to with Victor. The date and time lined up with one of his late work nights. I didn't accuse him. I didn't cry. I opened a document on my laptop and started writing things down. Dates, expenses, patterns, the phone calls, the guarded screen, the way Trisha's name appeared only when Victor thought I wasn't looking. I wasn't gathering evidence for a confrontation. I was gathering clarity for myself. That clarity solidified the afternoon I had lunch with my friend Marissa, who'd gone through a brutal separation the year before. She listened quietly as I laid it all out. The neglect, the entitlement, Noah's influence, Trisha's reappearance. When I finished, she didn't gasp or interrupt. She just said, "You already know what this is." I nodded. You're just deciding how long you want to live inside it. That night, Victor tried one last grand gesture. Flowers, a bottle of wine, music playing softly in the background. It would have worked on the woman I used to be. I love you, he said, earnest now, almost desperate. I don't want to lose this. I looked at him, really looked. At the man who had watched me carry everything and called it entitlement. At the man who only tried to change once the cost became personal. I don't think you ever loved me, I said gently. I think you loved how easy your life was with me in it. His face fell. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't about fixing anything. This was about ending it cleanly. Because fake turnarounds don't lead to real futures. They just delay the inevitable. Once the decision settled, it was surprisingly quiet inside me. Not numb, not cold. Resolved. I didn't announce anything. I didn't threaten. I didn't demand a final conversation to get closure. I'd already had all the closure I needed. The kind that arrives when you finally stop hoping someone will become who they promised to be. 2 days later, I met Claire. Marissa had recommended her with a simple sentence. She doesn't dramatize. She protects. Claire's office was understated. Clean lines, neutral colors. Nothing about it invited emotion, and I appreciated that. I told her everything. 7 years distilled into facts instead of feelings. The imbalance, the finances, the way Victor had checked out long before he ever said it out loud. Claire listened, took notes, asked questions that weren't comforting but precise. Are there children? No. Shared property? No. Joint accounts? Yes. She looked up at me. Are you certain? I thought about Bailey's empty bowl, about Noah's grin, about Victor's sentence. I don't have to cook, clean, or even sleep with you. Yes, I said, I'm certain. She nodded once. Then we moved forward. The paperwork came together faster than I expected. Separation terms, asset division, straightforward, clean, no theatrics. I picked up the folder on a Tuesday afternoon. The sky was gray in that dull, non-dramatic way that made everything feel real. When I got home, Victor was on the couch, phone in hand, shoes kicked off, the apartment in its usual half-state of neglect. He barely looked up as I walked in. I set the manila envelope on the coffee table between us. What's that? He asked, distracted. Something you should read. He frowned, finally setting his phone down. Pulled out the papers. I watched his face change. Confusion. Recognition. Panic. You're serious? He asked, voice tight. This is a tactic, right? I shook my head. No. You're trying to scare me. No. This is about control. No. He stood abruptly, pacing now. You can't just do this. I can, I said calmly, and I am. His voice cracked. After everything? I met his eyes. Exactly after everything. The days that followed were chaos. Victor cycled through emotions like he was trying to hit the right combination to unlock me again. Crying 1 minute, accusatory the next. Promising therapy, promising change, promising everything he'd never offered when it actually mattered. He called me at work repeatedly until I blocked his number and told him all communication needed to go through Claire. That didn't stop him from showing up at my office building one afternoon, trying to catch me during lunch. Security escorted him out. That night, I received a barrage of messages from unknown numbers. Him, borrowing phones, desperate and unhinged. Noah disappeared the moment things became inconvenient. Funny how empowerment advice evaporates when it requires accountability. A week later, Victor showed up crying, saying he'd cut Noah off, that he finally saw how toxic the influence had been, that he'd made a mistake listening to anyone but me. It might have meant something if it hadn't come after the papers. Promises made under pressure aren't growth. They're fear, and fear isn't a foundation. 2 weeks into the process, the inevitable implosion happened. Victor and Noah had a massive blowout. I heard about it through mutual friends. How Noah accused Victor of being weak, of letting me win. How Victor snapped and blamed Noah for encouraging him to treat our relationship like a competition instead of a commitment. They were both right, and both irrelevant to me now. Victor tried to use the fallout as proof of change. I'm cutting out bad influences, he said through Claire. Doesn't that count for something? It did, just not enough. Because the truth was simple and unmovable. If I had to leave for him to finally listen, then he'd already lost me. I moved out 6 weeks after I served the papers. Not because I was forced to, but because I wanted the chapter to end cleanly, without shared walls or lingering echoes of a life that no longer fit. I found a modest 1-bedroom about 20 minutes away. Smaller, quieter, mine. Bailey came with me. Victor didn't fight it. Not really. He stood there while I packed Bailey's things. His bed, his bowls, his ridiculous collection of toys, and said nothing. I think on some level he knew he couldn't take care of him properly. And maybe, just maybe, he knew Bailey deserved consistency. The morning I loaded the last box into the truck, Victor stood in the doorway, eyes red, voice shaking. Are you really doing this? He asked. Are you really throwing everything away? I looked at him and searched my chest for anger. There wasn't any. No bitterness, no resentment. Just exhaustion and relief. I'm not throwing anything away, I said quietly. There's nothing left to throw. This ended a long time ago. He cried then. Full body, gasping sobs. The kind people imagine will fix things if they come soon enough. They didn't. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. Clean, efficient, almost anticlimactic. We split our savings evenly, closed the joint account, paid off the shared credit card. I kept my car and retirement accounts. He kept his. Claire handled everything with calm professionalism. No courtroom drama. No drawn-out war. Just paperwork confirming what I'd already accepted emotionally. I heard through mutual friends that Victor started therapy after it was over. Real therapy. Not the performative kind meant to win someone back. I was glad to hear it. Not because I wanted him to suffer, but because I'd never wanted to be his lesson. I just refused to be his training ground. My life now is quieter, peaceful in ways I didn't know I was craving. I come home to an apartment that stays clean because I'm the only one responsible for it. I cook meals I enjoy without wondering who will take them for granted. I walk Bailey without coordinating or compensating or keeping mental score. I've started dating again. Slowly, intentionally. Conversations feel different now. I listen for reciprocity. I watch how effort shows up before words do. Sometimes I think back to the early years with Victor, the laughter, the plans, the version of him that once felt like home, and I wonder if there was a single moment where things could have gone another way. But mostly I've accepted this truth. Some relationships don't end because of one big betrayal. They end because one person stops showing up, and the other finally stops compensating. Victor may become a better partner for someone else someday. Therapy might help him understand what he lost and why. But that future isn't mine to build. I gave 7 years to someone who slowly stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a resource. And the moment I stopped providing that resource, he realized its value. By then, it was already gone. Some damage is permanent. Some words can't be taken back. And some marriages die long before anyone signs the papers. That's exactly what happened to mine. If this story resonated with you, or if you've lived something similar, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life stories. If this story hit close to home, you're not alone. Too many people stay far too long in relationships where effort becomes expected, respect fades quietly, and love turns into obligation. Remember this: partnership is not about endurance. It's about reciprocity. The moment you're the only one holding everything together, something is already broken. Thank you to everyone who shared their experiences and offered support. Your stories matter, and they help others recognize their own turning points sooner. If you found value in this story, drop a comment, hit like, and subscribe for more real-life, emotionally honest stories about boundaries, growth, and choosing yourself. See you in the next one.